back to my YouTube channel. If you're new around here, my name is Katie, I'm a full-time sketchbook artist, and today I'm going to be talking all about acrylic markers. More specifically, how to fill your own. So I really love using acrylic markers because they are super easy to use, they're very quick at laying down colour, great for plein air work and not getting as messy because all the paint is in this marker. I have done a video before about acrylic markers on my channel, so I'll leave that linked up in the cards and down below, but that was all about comparing pre-mixed colours. So there are loads of different brands that have their own colours, but for me, mixing my own means I can create my perfect colour palette and they're much more muted. I prefer more muted colours and the thicker nib sizes, so not all the colours are available in these larger sizes. So I'm going to be filling my own, I'll talk you through the process and show you exactly what you need to fill them. I have done a video on my Patreon before where I was filling these for the first time and I share a little bit more about the mixes and the colours I'm using there, but for today I'm just going to do a brief overview of what you need and how you can fill them. I hope you find this one interesting, let me know if you use acrylic markers down below, and let's get into the video. So here is my collection of acrylic markers that I've mixed myself. I've done these using Molotow Refills, so I'm going to show you those in a minute, but as you can see I tend to go for more paler neutral colours and then I do have a few darker ones. But the reason why I like to mix my own is because I find these are really hard to find in the pre-mixed ones. I do have this bag which is filled with my acrylic markers and these are great but they're too bright for me, so I tend to not reach for these because I prefer a more muted palette. I do use these, don't get me wrong, I do find them helpful, but there are definitely markers that I find are missing. There are generally 4 brands that I buy from for acrylic markers: Molotow, Montana, Liquitex and Posca. And they all have varying shade ranges and it all changes depending on the nib size. So for example, here I've got a Posca and I've got a Molotow and I prefer the thicker nib sizes. So here is an 8mm from Posca. And then here is a 4mm from Molotow. But what they don't do is these in their bigger sizes. So I love 15mm nib sizes, but generally I find that those have the really bright colours or the blacks because sometimes they are used for graffiti and street art. I love using the thicker sizes because I can get a lot of colour down, and although these are great for line work, I prefer to use them as my base. So that's why I have all of these here, because these are ones I've mixed myself and they're 15mm nibs. I find these are really great for putting down really quick colour and big blocks of colour, and that's what I prefer to work on top of with my other mixed media. So here's an example of this Montana marker that I mixed myself. I love a sky blue, but it has to be really pastel, and I just couldn't find it pre-mixed, so I made one myself. This one is still quite juicy, there's still quite a lot of colour in this one, so I don't need to top this up. But let's make a plan and I'll show you what you need to fill your own acrylic markers if you want to do your own too. Okay, so here's everything that I need. One thing you do need to know is that it will be messy, so it's not a clean process. It is quite messy because you're going to be mixing colours and it's definitely trial and error. So you need to have a bit of patience. A little bit of colour theory is helpful, but as long as you know the basics, you're fine. But just know that it will be a little bit messy. So what you'll need is the refills. Now I've got all of these from the Montana brand, but I've also got some bigger ones. This one's Montana, but these ones are Molotow. So there are different brands for the different refills as well. I find that there's not much difference in between them, so don't worry, it just depends what you can get. That's local to you. You can see that they do come separated, so they need a really good shake just to combine the liquid with the pigment. This one is 25mm. Let's give that a shake. And I just find that's easier to combine when it is combined in the smaller format. You actually don't need a huge amount, so although it doesn't look like much, obviously if you're just doing yellow, which it wouldn't be much point, but if you were, it wouldn't fill the full marker, but you don't need to fill these up. I also have these ones, which are 180mm, and these are great. I found when I was first mixing my acrylic markers that I used a lot of white. So I've got this one from Montana and this one from Molotow. They're basically the same size and everything, same lids and just a different brand. But I use this a lot obviously because I do prefer my muted, more pastel shades. I've got my old markers here because there are a few I want to refill because I've used them up. I did find they lasted really well for me. Obviously I don't use them every day. If I was, then they would need refilling more often. But because I've got so much mixed media, I did find these lasted a good year before I needed to refill. But obviously, as I said, I don't reach for them all the time. I want to refill my light green and my dark green. The others are all fine and there are enough in them. So they're all good and I can pop them to the side. Now, if you are filling from scratch, then you will need to know the colours and you'll also need some empty markers. So I've got this one, which is the Montana brand. And then I've also got these, which are off-brand. So these I bought from Amazon, and I'm not sure how they're going to work, so it's going to be really helpful to see. This came in a pack of 4. And the other thing I do want to mention is that this isn't a cheap thing to do. It is quite expensive. I think just for the empty marker, it's about £5. And then for a full one, if you're buying it, for example, brand new, like one of these, it's about £7 to £8 each. So these aren't a cheap art supply, but I really like the flexibility I can get by mixing it myself. These are about £16 a pop, and these are slightly cheaper. I'll put all the prices on screen. But yeah, it's not a cheap hobby, that's for sure. So this one is the Montana, and then this one is the cheaper one on Amazon. So you can see here that the Amazon one is a lot smaller, so it's maybe about an inch or half an inch difference in the barrel shape. And as for the sponge at the top, not quite as rounded. The Montana one definitely has more of a rounded tip. This one, I think it will round with use, but you can definitely see where it's cut at an angle there. They're both 15mm, so that's not an issue. They're pretty similar. It's definitely a different material though, because this one's more cream coloured. But it's going to be really interesting, especially because of leaks, so I will report back once I've used these and filled them up to see if I notice anything different. The other thing they've got inside them are some little glass marbles. You can see that there. And that's to help mix the pigment inside. So as I said with the refills where you have to shake them, you also have to shake the mix that you put in. The Montana comes with one big marble, and there are 2 little ones in the Amazon version. The other thing that I'll mention now, but we'll probably mention again, is that you have to pump through the liquid. So here's a gold, which I haven't used. And you can see the nib is still clear because I haven't yet pumped through the colour. And so what's also useful when you're creating your own mixes is to try and get the colour inside first, before you then pump it through to your nib. So they come with this mechanism, which looks like this, and then mix your colour in here, and then we pop that back on. It's really important to pop this on. That's not quite as secure as the Montana, so that's going to be really interesting. But basically, once you start pumping it through, it's really hard to then shake it because it will come out onto the lid. I think it will be easier for me to just show you rather than explain, but we're going to create this together. So let's talk about the colours that I want to mix up today. Okay, so aside from these ones, which we already know I want to do, we've got the green and the yellow. I believe I used shock green for this one, and then a bit of yellow and maybe some black. I can't quite remember, so it is definitely going to be trial and error. I did try and make mixes, but I find it's just easier to do by eye. And then this one uses quite a lot of yellow. I'm hoping I've got enough here to remix this one. And then for new colours, I want to definitely use this one. This is the Amazonas Light by Molotow. I definitely want to use that and make a darker shade of it as well. This one is a bit too bright for me. This one is Grasshopper. I want to mix a different green. I love using greens, that's my most used colour, so I definitely want to make some more of my own. And mix in a bit more red just to try and neutralise it a little bit. I did also buy this one in my recent haul. This is Molotow Mr. Green, and it's just way too lurid for me, so I want to try and put a bit of black into this one just to make it more usable. And then I also want to make a really soft light pink. Now I do have this pink here, which is fluorescent fire red. I don't know how that's going to turn out. I might try and mix it with the white and possibly a touch of yellow just to make it a little bit less fluorescent, but we'll see how we go. So let's see. We will have one of these for the green and the other green, one of these for the light pink. Is that all? Everything I said? I've got my light blue already. This one I'm going to try and mix in. Oh, and one of these for a darker green. Let's see how we go. I definitely have enough of these, so that's all good. And yeah, cue the montage of a lot of experimenting and shaking. I'm starting by mixing up the 2 colours that I want to create. You can see I did swatch it first in the top left corner, and that just helps me to match it up. So you'll see that I do trial and error. So I mix up this. I'm just using the wrong end of a paintbrush to mix it all together. It's a little bit too green, so I added some more white. and that really helped. So you can see there it's quite vibrant. I actually wanted to tone it down a little bit, so I wanted it to be a bit more olivey, and I really like the new colour, so it's okay to change things up. That's the beauty of this, so you might as well make it customizable and really make the shades work for you. If you find that something isn't working, you can just add in other colours and change it. So this one is the Mr. Green, so I actually poured some of it into another container because I didn't need all of that in there. I wanted to make room for the other colours. So I added in quite a lot of red. It took quite a long time, this one, to actually make it into a nicer shade. So I kept having to pour it out because I needed to make room for the new colours going in. So that's something to think about if you are customising an already made colour. You'll probably want to mix that into something else so that there's enough room. So the next one was super quick because I used the Amazonas Light and the black to mix a really nice dark green. So really happy with this one. I think I'll get a lot of use out of this. This was trying to mix up the darker shade as well. So I've got some really nice mixes of greens here, which I'm definitely going to get a lot of use out of. This one was the partial Mr. Green, so I really found that quite strong. So that one has come out as a mid-tone, but as you can see, this page is getting very messy. It is messy work, but it's really nice to be able to mix these colours and just have a play, really. So you're not going to make this an easy, clean process. My hands were absolutely covered with colour and pigment by the end of it, but I really enjoyed it, and I actually think these colours work really nicely together as a palette on their own. I can top these up as I go. If I do run out, then I can remix the colours like I did with the first one, but I can also change it up. So when it's empty, I can wash them out, or I can actually use what's already in there and just change the shades slightly. So definitely a fun but messy process. So it's been a few days since I filled these markers from the time lapse that you just saw because I was losing the light. So I wanted to just come on and do a little recap of all the colours that I've got now. So many greens, which makes me very happy. They are definitely my most used colours. I have been storing them upright, but so far so good, and I have used some of these already with the cheaper Amazon brand, so that's good, but I will keep you updated whether they do leak when they aren't upright. But there's been no leakage in the lids or anything, so that's all good. So I'm going to swatch these out. Now, 2 of them I did refill. So that was the light sort of yellow green and the darker green. And you can see, you'll probably have seen in the time lapse as well, I swatched this out first and then tried to colour match it. And I was pretty close quite early on, as I mentioned in the voiceover, but I do prefer it a bit more olive toned. So that did change very slightly. I'm just going to do it over here on the back of this page. I feel like with this many greens, I'm going to have to name them. You can see that these are much more juicy now, so the paint is really, really wet, which is really good. So that's generally how I know when I'm ready to refill. Then we've got this one, which is the yellow-green. Oh, this one was very wet. It's kind of splattered all over the page, and this is a Montana brand one, but sometimes when you pump them through, it does get a little bit too wet, and that's what's happened here, which is why the lid is quite messy. But I really like this green, and I think it pairs really nicely too. Next up, we've got the other green. So I mixed 4 greens. This one was the Mr. Green that came as it was, but was too lurid for me. I do wonder if I could add even more red because it's still quite bright, but I do have plenty of more neutral greens for me. So I might still stick with this one, but let me swatch these underneath for you. So you can see it's still very bright. It's more like a, I don't know, a jungle green or something. And then we've got these 3, which I'm really excited about. I think these are going to get a lot of use. So I've got this one, which, yeah, I think if I change this one, it'll be quite similar. These ones look quite similar. As I say, I do use a lot of greens. This one's definitely more olive toned, and this one's not quite as olive. So just a nice dark green. Then I've also got this one. So I've made a mid, a light, and a dark green. This one is definitely less olive. So I've got my 2 olives at the top, and then these ones more like forest greens. And then I also made this one, and I definitely think I'm going to use this one a lot. So this was from the Amazonas Light, which I loved, and mixed with white. With the Amazonas Green, I will buy a thicker marker because I didn't fill one marker with just that because I thought I could just buy it, but they actually only have it in the 2mm pen. So I definitely want to do that. But I love this green. I think that's going to work really nicely, and it works so well with these 3 greens above as well. But yeah, I'm going to fill a 15mm marker, which is what these are, with the Amazonas green, just as it is, because I think I'll use that a lot. I don't know why they don't do the colours in all of the nib sizes. But then we also have 2 rogue ones. Well, I've got the pink one I said, and then I had the spare marker, which I wish I'd filled up with a Amazonas green, but I didn't realise they didn't come. So I'm just going to buy some more. These are really cheap from Amazon, and so far so good. So I mixed this dark sort of midnight blue, but this pink I'm really happy with. So I'm just going to swatch that. Again, it's barely coming up on the camera, so I will put an overlay on, but it's a really nice soft pink. It actually really reminds me of a Liquitex one I've got. It's definitely a lot more lighter and more neutral when you compare it with this, but with Liquitex, they're probably my least favourite marker because they dry quite shiny and glossy. It's a little bit harder to work over those, whereas these are very matte. And then lastly, I made this blue. It's not as dark as sort of like a midnight blue. It reminds me a little bit of the slate blue by Posca, but it's definitely more blue than that. Oh, sorry, it's not called slate blue, it's called slate grey, which is this one. So it reminds me of this one, but you can see that's definitely more dull, and this one's definitely got a lot more blue in it. So I'm really, really happy with these colours. I think they're definitely going to get a lot of use. I'm really looking forward to doing some more plein air work, especially with all of these greens. I want to go out into the forest and actually use them in my sketchbook plein air. So I hope that's been interesting. I hope you've enjoyed seeing the process. I really enjoy using acrylic markers, and I find that, as I said at the beginning, it's tricky to get the colours that you want. So mixing yourself, although it is expensive, it definitely works for me. So I hope you found this helpful if it's something that you're interested in, and let me know your thoughts down below in the comments. Otherwise, I hope you have a creative week, and I will see you next Sunday in a new YouTube video. See you later!